This is Land of Havilah, Proverbs 6. In this chapter, the Proverbs come in paragraphs. It's all stuff that you don't realize how bad it is until you mess around and find out. The first proverb has to do with becoming collateral, also described as striking hands in pledge. Today we call it co-signing a loan. If you make the mistake of co-signing a loan or shaking hands on it or giving your verbal commitment to it, here's what you should do. Verse 1. My son, if you've become collateral for your neighbor, if you've struck hands in pledge for a stranger, you're trapped by the words of your mouth. You're ensnared with the words of your mouth. Do this now, my son, and deliver yourself, since you've come into the hand of your neighbor. Go humble yourself. Press your plea with your neighbor. Give no sleep to your eyes, nor slumber to your eyelids. Free yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, like a bird from the snare of the fowler. Comment, when you co-sign a loan, hopefully the borrower will keep up with the payments, but if he doesn't, the co-signer's on the hook for them. When the borrower doesn't pay, it'll ruin the relationship between the borrower and the co-signer. The co-signer will resent the borrower, and the borrower will resent the resentment. Winding back to the beginning of the fiasco, since the lender wanted a co-signer, that should have told the co-signer right away that the borrower wasn't creditworthy. The co-signer is the focus of this proverb. It's a bad deal for him financially and relationship-wise. Now what to do about it in verses 2 to 5 if you've co-signed. First, in verse 2, realize what a horrible trap this is. Then in verses 3 to 5, you need to go into emergency mode. Probably you can't escape this obligation since you already co-signed, but maybe if the loan hasn't been issued yet, there's still time to convince the borrower not to take it, or maybe the borrower has already received the loan, but he hasn't spent the money yet. You can convince him to pay it back immediately because you decided you want out. Failing that, maybe the borrower can refinance and exclude you this time, but probably not. But it's worth the effort to make an exit when possible and as soon as possible. Now changing the subject, a simple proverb about having a work ethic. If you don't have one, Solomon calls you a sluggard. Verse 6. Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider her ways and be wise, which, having no chief, overseer, or ruler, provides her bread in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest. Comment, if you're lazy and have no work ethic, an ant has more brains than you, Solomon says. The ant doesn't need an overseer in verse 7. He's smart enough to work without being forced or prodded. Why can't you be as smart as an ant? The ant works ahead. He doesn't live paycheck to paycheck. He knows slow times are coming. They come every winter, no surprise at all. So whenever he has the opportunity, he works and saves because he's got at least a little something in his triangular head. He always works except when he can't. Verse 9. How long will you sleep, sluggard? When will you arise out of your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep, so your poverty will come as a robber and your scarcity as an armed man. Comment in verses 9 to 11, if you're lazy, watch out. Poverty might overtake you. In another translation, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and your poverty comes on you like an armed man. In other words, don't procrastinate, get up and do it now, or something bad's going to happen. Get up in the morning and work is the bottom line. Your narrator remembers ninth grade study hall. He was amazed that 90% of the kids in there did nothing with 100% of their time. Now changing the subject, speaking of being shady, verse 12. A worthless person, a man of iniquity, is he who walks with a perverse mouth, who winks with his eyes, who signals with his feet, who motions with his fingers, in whose heart is perverseness, who devises evil continually, who always sows discord. Therefore his calamity will come suddenly. He'll be broken suddenly, and that without remedy. Comment, a worthless person in verse 12 speaks with a perverse mouth. In verse 13, he winks, signals with his feet, and motions with his fingers. In other words, he's in cahoots with his friends. He's shady. If it's good, it's generally in the open. If it's not good, it has to be whispered and signaled privately. Calamity will come suddenly and without remedy to him in verse 15. So let's keep everything above board. Verse 16. There are 6 things which Yahweh hates, yes, 7 which are an abomination to him: arrogant eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are swift in running to mischief, a false witness who utters lies, and he who sows discord among brothers. Comment in verse 16, we know God hates more than 7 things because there are more than 7 ways to do evil. But 7 things came to Solomon's mind when he made this list. Arrogant eyes are the first on the list in verse 17. God's opposed to the proud but gives grace to the humble, James 4:6. Better to have every enemy there is than to be proud and be opposed by God. When we're arrogant, our facial expression gives us away. We can't hide it. We see others' arrogance and they see ours. We see straight through each other when we're arrogant. Haughty eyes, Solomon calls it in verse 17. Then going down the list, there's lying, murder, wickedness, mischief. Lying again in verse 19, that made the list twice. But the second mention of it may have more to do with false accusation, being a false witness, it says. And lastly, sowing discord among brothers. When people are getting along, don't disturb the peace. Now another subject, verse 20. My son, keep your father's commandment, and don't forsake your mother's teaching. Bind them continually on your heart. Tie them around your neck. When you walk, it will lead you. When you sleep, it will watch over you. When you awake, it will talk with you. For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is a light. Reproofs of instruction are the way of life. Comment, my son, remember what your parents told you in verses 20 to 23. It's also translated, my child, so it applies to daughters also. Grammatically, it's the same as Spanish, that when referring to both sexes, the default gender is male. The gist of it from verses 20 to 23 is, children, do what your parents say because it'll pay off. It's not directed so much at adult children. By the time we get older, our parents' advice has become part of us, and we don't remember so much exactly what they said. But when we're young, what they tell us rings in our ears. In verse 23, reproofs of instruction are the way of life. In other words, your parents' correction, though you think it's a bother now, you may even resent it. It'll give you a good and happy life if you listen. Don't think their correction as a burden is actually going to lighten your load, but you can't see it that way yet. The next 12 verses to the end of the chapter morph into a parent's warnings about adultery. Verse 24. To keep you from the immoral woman, from the flattery of the wayward wife's tongue. Don't lust after her beauty in your heart, neither let her captivate you with her eyelids. For a prostitute reduces you to a piece of bread. The adulteress hunts for your precious life. Comment, the prostitute does a sales job on you. She's not impressed with you. She just wants your money. She reduces you to a piece of bread in verse 26, meaning she sees you and your money as a living. She's not thinking it's a pleasure to do business with you. She's thinking it's just business, no pleasure. Moving on from her to the adulteress, she hunts for your life in verse 26. She comes at you with beauty and flattery in verses 24 and 25, but she might as well be coming at you with a gun because she hunts for your precious life in verse 26. She'll ruin you, your marriage, your family, your finances, and there might actually be a gun involved because her husband might shoot you. Speaking of adultery, verse 27, can a man scoop fire into his lap and his clothes not be burned? Or can one walk on hot coals and his feet not be scorched? So is he who goes in to his neighbor's wife. Whoever touches her will not be unpunished. Men don't despise a thief if he steals to satisfy himself when he's hungry, but if he's found, he shall restore 7 times. He shall give all the wealth of his house. Comment, if a thief steals bread, it's because he's hungry, which is somewhat an excuse, but there's zero excuse for adultery. There's nothing to soften the adulterer's guilt. Adultery is a completely unforced error. It won't cost the thief that much if he steals bread, but the adulterer pays 7 times all the wealth of his house in verse 31. One of the U.S. presidents lost his reputation by committing adultery in office. He claimed he didn't go into her, but he touched her inappropriately, and the result was the same. Verse 29 came to roost on him. He who touches her will not be unpunished. Verse 32. He who commits adultery with a woman is void of understanding. He who does it destroys his own soul. He'll get wounds and dishonor. His reproach will not be wiped away. For jealousy arouses the fury of the husband. He won't spare in the day of vengeance. He won't regard any ransom, neither will he rest content, though you give many gifts. Comment in verse 32, he destroys his own soul, meaning it'll be damaging from the perpetrator's own viewpoint. In verse 33, his reproach will not be wiped away. Everyone will remember how he shamed himself for the rest of their lives. He'll be notorious as long as he lives and after. Is the type of thing people remember. In verse 34, the husband will be furious. He'll take whatever vengeance he can. In verse 35, there's nothing you can do to calm him down. Proverbs 7 is next.